In this video I'm showing how I built a 6 GPU open air mining frame. I'll be using these aluminum angle strips that I got from Home Depot. You can pick up an 8-foot strip of this for just over $10, and in total I used 3 strips to build this frame with some oddball sizes left over at the end. I used a DeWalt miter saw with a metal cutting blade to cut these to the correct lengths, but there's probably a dozen different ways you can cut these if you don't have access to a miter saw. I cut one with an angle grinder with a cutting wheel on it just for fun, but I'm sure these can be cut with some sort of hand tool if power tools aren't an option. To fasten the strips together, I used my drill along with some self-tapping screws. It's $8 for a 100 pack of these screws, which is way more screws than you'll need, so get a smaller amount if that's an option. I'm not one of those channels that's greedy and likes to stretch a video out to 10 minutes when it's really only a couple minutes worth of content. I know time's valuable, so I'm going to speed up through most of this and you'll get the gist of it anyways. If you've never used self-tapping screws before, the way that they work is that the head of the screw drills the hole and then they thread themselves in. So you might have to press down kind of hard on the drill for a while, so it helps if you have a solid surface to work against. I just used a scrap piece of wood and it seemed to work fine. One thing I learned on this is to do your measurements based on your motherboard instead of your graphics cards, since the graphics cards can sort of hang out over the side of the frame and it's not a big deal, but the motherboard has standoffs in specific places that need to mount to something, and you'll see the consequences of overlooking this later in the video. As the frame takes shape, you'll notice that the aluminum is really rigid and sturdy when you get it mounted together. It's also really light, so I'm pretty happy with how it came out. And this is what the frame looks like built out with the micro ATX board and the 3 graphics cards that I've managed to obtain so far. And I also added one more crossbar here for the risers to rest on. And as for mounting the graphics cards, I used the exact same self-tapping screws and they seem to have worked fine. And as I mentioned earlier, I didn't exactly plan ahead with mounting the motherboard, so I had to pick up 2 flat aluminum strips and then add them to the frame as well, and then drill holes for the motherboard standoffs. For the standoffs, these are actually just rubber plumbing seals that I also got from Home Depot for $1 or something, and a small pack of whatever size screws would fit the holes in the motherboard. I was too excited to get it running, so I neglected to pre-drill all the holes for fans and whatnot. It helps if you do this ahead of time, but it's not a big deal if you don't. Just cover all the components so you don't get any metal shavings anywhere. I just use your standard 120mm case fans here, with some zip ties to hold them to the frame. That's pretty much all there is to see. Building the frame itself took probably 2 or 3 hours if you count the trips to Home Depot. But compared to the insane prices you'll pay for a pre-built frame off of Amazon, I still think you come out ahead doing it this way. And I'll put a link in the description for every single piece of hardware that you saw in this video, both the supplies that I used to build the mining frame itself, as well as the electronic components that actually do the mining. One more tip I found that helps is to drill a hole for your power supply screws just to hold that guy in place as well. And for the rest of the components such as the solid state drive or cabling from your risers, I found that it helps use Velcro to keep them neat and out of the way, which makes everything really compact and clean for whenever you need to pick it up and move it somewhere else. So that's all there is to the video. Hope this was useful if somebody out there is considering building their own frame. Hit the like button if this video was helpful, and thanks for viewing.